All right. Good morning to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us wherever you are watching from. And as I had mentioned a little earlier in our prior show with This Week in Review, um, for this next show, we're going to be doing, I guess you can call a retrospective of a con that happened last week, which is Dragon Con. And if for those of you that may not be familiar, with that show, it's a show, a pop culture show that was started back in the late 80s, and over each decade in that time, they've done various things to, expand it in the 1990s with us having the Friday night wrestling and robot battles that they've had in the 2000s, moving the show to Labor Day weekend, which, thinking about it now, it's kind of weird to think of the show happening at any other time of the year, because I feel like that weekend is so synonymous with that show. In my experience in the few years that I've attended. Now, in doing this retrospective, I have a couple of guests joining me to, share their thoughts on this year's show, because, as you well know, unless you've been living under a rock, there's been so much that has happened in our world that has affected many of the things that, many of the everyday things that, we take for granted, whether it's cons, whether it's film festivals, other, events that many of us like to attend over a year. And so, this was the first year back, after, a year and a half of being away. So with that out of the way, I want to introduce two of the guests that I have. First up, they are not a stranger to this show. They provide their talents as a journalist with Friends of Comic-Con, and they also provide their talents with the show that we have for The Expanse here, among many other things. So it is my pleasure to welcome back Michael Pia. Let me bring him on. Hey, Michael, what's going on, man?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Next up, this is their first time on the show. They've, been an illustrator for, much of their life, and have provided, their talents on many works for Marvel, and many other projects as well. It's my pleasure to welcome Daniel Govar. Let me bring him on. One sec. Here we go. What's going on, Daniel? How you doing? Bring you on. There we go.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
What's going on? All right. So, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for hopping on. As I said, it is a a Saturday, so I appreciate you guys coming on during a weekend. That's not normally the norm, unless you guys obviously are at a show, of course. But also additionally, also considering the fact that, some of us are not on the same part of the country. So appreciate you, also hopping in that regard too, with the different time zones. So with that being said, I just wanted to start first before we get into the nitty gritty of the show. Just checking in and talking about, how have you been in this last year and a half, and how it has, shaped, what you do, whether it's, Daniel with you on the, artist side, and the work that, that you have, commissions, what have you. And then, even with you, Michael, on being aware of, many of these shows, as I said, that it seems like now we're getting them all thrown up at us at once. It feels like, it seems like every weekend there's a con, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, why is there so much stuff happening? But yeah, whoever would like to go first.
Well, all right. You're talking about all the cons happening at the same time. Did you notice in December we have Emerald City Comic Con, we have C2E2, we have the World Science Fiction Convention, all one right after another, and that's the and at the end of November we have San Diego Comic Con. So it's like, okay,
don't remind
what's
me.
going on here? I mean, it's ridiculous.
They were all hedging their bets. They were like, okay, let's just put it all off till the end of the year. Everything should be cool then.
Right, like this is like insane. But otherwise, with each of you, like, just respectively, how has it been?
I know for me, everything's been
Okay,
pretty good. I transitioned pretty well without doing conventions. I do a lot of commissions, and a lot of my clients I work with remotely anyhow. So it didn't really affect me all that much, um, except I miss people. I miss actually seriously like talking to people at conventions. That was kind of my social outlet.
gotcha.
I miss like interacting with fans, and it was just different online. Um, there were, but I feel like the thirst for art didn't really go away at all. In fact, it kind of increased. I felt like I worked a lot
For
more
sure.
here than I did
Yeah.
previous years.
Cool. Mike?
There's an old science fiction story by novel by Isaac Asimov,
Mm.
and there's a group called the Spacers, and they were one of the first groups that went out into space when they got the faster than light drive, and they built a planet where everybody had their own estate, and so they never physically interacted with each other, and that's the exact opposite of humanity. And one of the things that this whole pandemic proved to us is that we need to talk. We need to be with other people. We are very social creatures, okay? And so it's been really rough. Locally, you could do a few things locally, but it's not the same. And we go to the cons, to get back with our tribe, with our tribe and stuff. And our tribe are the geeks and the nerds. That's our tribe, and we have to be together with our tribe, and that's true of everyone.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, just as I was talking about at the top, obviously, there have been some, even with our shows being back, we've had some things, understandably so, change with a lot of our cons and that con experience. So, whether it's and I've had other folks here and talking about their first shows back and how things have been different and different facets. So like, give me an example. Photo ops. Our photo ops obviously are probably going to be forever changed for a while. Having plexiglass between yourself and the guests in order to make the photos work, or not really being able to do photos with guests at their tables, obviously. How comfortable are guests to be able to do that type of thing, even with in your regard, Daniel, of having folks artists masked at an artist alley, and in many cases having plexiglass between yourself and the attendees. So and even traffic, like obviously for some shows they may have a cutoff on how many attendees they're bringing in, and some people are kind of eliminated automatically just because of protocols that are in place of being vaccinated. So like so many different variables and facets. So can you guys talk about what it was like to be back at Dragon Con under all of those circumstances?
You-
For either of you, whoever like to go.
No, Daniel.
Go
yeah,
ahead.
it was. I mean, it was safe. This was my third convention so far. Dragon Con was number 3, and it was definitely the biggest of the 3. I did MegaCon 3 weeks prior, and that was another very large convention. Both of them were incredibly safe. I mean, this one they checked everybody. I mean, guests and visitors alike, attendees alike, everybody. They checked off my card. They made sure everything was set.
Right.
And then everyone was masked the entire convention, even cosplayers. I mean, you really kind of wanted
Yeah,
to
I
stay
saw.
away.
Yeah.
Anytime I saw cosplayers where they took off their masks, they tended to do it away from everybody if they were going to do that, or they were outside altogether for photos and things of that nature. So
Cool.
it was pretty well done.
Cool.
I didn't ever feel unsafe in any way, shape, or form. So.
Cool. And then I mean, even I was gonna say more so just the the dynamic of what normally would happen at a con. You know, you were just talking about it before. You know, interaction between yourself and other attendees. You know, how was that dynamic? Because one thing that I found fascinating, because I've been back, quote unquote, at a con, and that part of it has really been interesting too, and on a social level, of kind of seeing that nonverbal communication that happens where like person's saying, okay, should I like give you a handshake? Like, am I gonna elbow bump you, or am I just gonna wave? Like, what should we do here?
Yeah, there's definitely like a weird protocol that happens. It's like, okay, are they going for a fist or an elbow, or are we doing a toe tap? Because that's even
right.
A couple of my friends that are it's like suddenly a foot gets stuck out a foot. I'm like, oh, we're doing that now. I haven't done that yet. It's like, okay, let's toe tap. That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, you just have to kind of roll with it, whatever makes someone feel safe,
For sure. And Mike, when you're in, attending and understanding, how Dragon Con is under normal circumstances, even under normal circumstances, Dragon Con is amazing and it can get like crazy in a good way. So, can you tell me, for you, how it was to be back this year?
Well, I was at the Marriott Marquis, and that place was packed. Okay, the elevators were packed. I think it was a Thursday night they had a DJ, and I think Friday night they had a DJ, and that place was packed. So honestly, I wasn't surprised how everybody behaved, because it was a sense of, we're trying to go back to normality, to what we knew.
Yeah.
And so it's most people were, most people, 99%, well, 99.9% of the people, everybody was, they'd been tested, they wore their mask like they're supposed to. If they didn't wear the mask, it's just that they forgot for a second, they went back, got their mask and stuff. So everybody wanted to have a good time, but everybody wanted to be safe at the same time. And I think it was, we don't seem to have a super spreader event afterwards. I mean, I haven't seen any data so far. Yeah. And for most part, people were very cognizant of what's going on. So we'll see. We have to give it another week. I mean, we'll see if it's a super spreader. But if MegaCon wasn't a super spreader, I don't think DragonCon was, because everybody was very safe.
I should note that MegaCon didn't check for vaccination or anything like that. But it was definitely, they had roving mask Gestapo that would chase you down if you didn't have a mask on, or if your mask was pulled down slightly. They were also running people down who had inferior masks and actually giving them better ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the person who runs the exhibitor hall over there is actually a working doctor. And gotcha. she was amazing. I literally watched her chase somebody down. it was crazy. But yeah, it was, but they were checking people right at the door. If they didn't have a mask, they gave them one before they entered, and explained the rules. And every hour they came over the loudspeaker reminding everybody. So it was kind of an ever-present thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't feel that way at DragonCon though. I didn't feel like it was, there was no people coming over the speaker explaining the mask policy. I think the only time you really got that was at the very beginning, and then maybe on entering some of the buildings. But aside from that, I didn't really feel like the mask policy needed to be enforced that much.
Sure, yeah.
People tried, just as you were mentioning, to remain, vigilant on that.
And then on top of that too, just that idea of having that prerequisite in place first, I think, put a lot of people at ease too. So, that probably played into why it wasn't as you said, reinforced again and again. So, I mean, that makes a perfect sense. And in thinking of that, switching gears a bit and talking about, well, I'll punt it over to you, Dan, first, and talking about each show. I was talking with another contemporary, another artist who was he was over in Artist Alley. Daniel, another Dan, was in that area and talking about just that whole idea when it comes to a con and trying to figure. Dan Darty was telling me, yeah, he was talking about that unique idea in under normal circumstances at a con of trying to figure out what work to bring and what work not to bring, because he does a little bit of everything. He does a lot of things that are more family oriented, and then he does some stuff that's a lot more mature, obviously. So trying to find that balance and figure out, okay, at this show, will this play a little better, or will this work a little better? And he was telling me with Dragon Con, that's normally not the case. He can normally bring a bit of both, but obviously at another given show, it might be more tailored towards one thing or the other. Do you find that is something that you come across, or is it really standard across the board at any show?
No, I totally agree. I actually keep a spreadsheet of all the conventions I go to, and I list everything that sells well at certain cons and not at others. If I don't sell certain things, I kind of make a note of it.
Cool.
Yeah, so that I just don't bring it to that con the next year or anything along those lines. I find that Dragon Con gets a really weird crowd. When I say weird, I mean that it's not...
The interest is all over the place.
It is. It's kind of a mixed bag, but I will say that the superhero stuff tends to kind of go to the side. It's not as... most of the comic conventions that I do, you can pretty much sell superhero stuff in any of those. At Dragon,
you need the more obscure stuff.
You need something that's
eclectic.
Yeah. If you have, Dungeons and Dragons or anything that's, fantasy or sci-fi oriented, it tends to do better there than it will at most of the other conventions. Luckily, a lot of my stuff is kind of along those lines, so it works out.
Definitely.
I had my own personal art books that sold out, and then I had my graphic novels, which, it was really tough to move there. It was a harder sell for people to buy graphic novels, but my art books, it was just like hotcakes. Yeah, it was an interesting mix. It's usually flip flopped, so it's a tougher one.
Gotcha. And Mike, on your end, with this year's show, in terms of like your normal routine, did it change this year in terms of what you would do at a Dragon Con under normal circumstances of going to panels or going to certain events, or did it basically remain the same? Did you try out different things this year that perhaps you didn't try out other years in terms of what the show had to offer?
Well, this cup, I have to put in a thing for the Expanse, right?
Of course,
there's just no way I can't say something about the Expanse. Okay? But the bottom line was that at Dragon Con, I was on a panel. I was on an Expanse panel. Okay.
Yes.
And then I'd like to attend the smaller panels. And so I didn't go to the big, with the panels where they had these long lines. The longest line I stood in was for Jim Butcher, who's an author, right? He does the Dresden Files. And that's what I like about Dragon Con. You go there and we're hanging out with, the panels. It's a total interaction between the panelists and the people sitting there. So you're having this discussion about your favorite shows. And that's what I love about Dragon Con. Comic-Con San Diego, you can't do that. You get a few questions in with the stars, blah, 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 but that's, but in the smaller panels, to a certain extent, there's a little interaction, but Dragon Con has bigger interaction. And, as a fan, I can be on a panel at Dragon Con. As a fan, I'm not going to be on a panel at San Diego or New York. It's just not going to happen, because they're so huge. So that's the fun part for me. I really had a good time with that. And of course, anytime I can talk about the Expanse, I'm happy. So
Cool. And with that in mind, guys, like overall, like would you, if we were to say kind of the things that were like the wins or the things that were really, awesome about this year, would you second those things, or would there be any additional things that you wanted to comment on that you thought were like really great about this year, with everything, that's going on that you wanted to also, highlight and bring attention to? And I'll start with you, Michael, this time. Go ahead. Yeah, you
I
can
was hoping you
think
were going to
of.
start with Dan this time.
No, I'm gonna
So-
switch it up. I have Dan finish it off.
Okay, what was the question again? Because I was waiting for Dan to answer it.
No worries. No. So I know we were, talking about, some of the things that are a part of like our normal, routine with a Dragon Con, and just talking about those things that are a part of our routine. I feel like would be a good transition into many of those things that we love about Dragon Con. And with this year's show, I wanted to see if there were any like specific things that you could highlight, or things that come to mind immediately about this year's edition that you really enjoyed, or thought that was really executed well or done well.
Well, I want to change it up a little bit because you're asking about something good. Honestly,
Don't worry, I'm going to get to the other part too.
Well, change it up just a little bit because they had an issue. And I know, Dan, you probably didn't see this, but I had a press badge and I had a regular badge because I like to support them. So I went ahead and bought a regular badge too.
Okay.
And I was in line to get the regular badge. That was a problem. That was really, really problematic. They had one person checking for your ID and your COVID status, the vaccine, or else the negative COVID test.
Right.
We had this huge line. That line went around one of those big blocks and went around half of another block before you even got inside. Once you're inside, they had all these switchbacks. They had like 10 switchbacks, chutes.
Yeah.
And then they had one person checking the IDs and the vaccine status. One person. And if there was an issue, they stopped the entire line to work through that issue.
That's good. You got the perspective of the guest attendee status.
Right.
I only went through the guest line, so I didn't really have. There wasn't really a line, and I just didn't really have to do any of that stuff, so I never really saw it. But I did see the line wrapped around the block, which it typically is for tickets.
But it usually works a lot faster. In this case, the most, because, when I went to pick up my press pass, just like that. I mean, seriously, it was just that quick.
That's
but I wanted to stand in line. And so I had, the good thing about standing in line in any of these conventions, you get a chance to chat with people, and you meet new friends, you make new friends. And, that's one of the fun parts about being in these lines. But the bad part about that line, they actually had to call the paramedics. One person nearly passed out in line.
Oh, wow.
It was, I think the bad part about it is I don't think they had as many volunteers as they've had in the past, because it would seem more logical to be able to have 2 or 3 people there checking that stuff and going through, and then, just working down the line. Yeah. So as the people came through, you always had like 10 people ready to go go pick up the badges, because it got to the point literally where there are people waiting, behind the booths to give people their badges. But because they had one person checking it, these guys were all sitting there waiting. And it just, I don't think they'll ever have that problem again, but I still think it's a volunteer issue. I don't think that they wanted to do it that way, but I got the feeling that there were not as many volunteers as in the past.
Yeah, I did hear from the head of the Comic and Pop Artist Alley. He was saying that a lot of the volunteers were actually turned away. A lot of them got there, and only when they got there did they learn they needed to have a lot of their documentation on vaccination and things of that nature. So there was definitely a shortage of volunteers, according to everybody. So that might speak to that.
Well, that's really puzzling, because they really put a lot of information out about people having to have this, and why the people, the volunteers would assume they're exempt from that is a puzzle to me. I just don't get that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they went constantly on social media. It was right there on the website. I would be willing to bet you they sent emails out to volunteers telling them what the safety protocols were. Because I was getting emails constantly about this stuff, you know, not only the emails, but, you know, just the social media. And then actually on their website too, it was on the front page of their website.
Mm-hmm. No, it was everywhere as far as I know. I will say that I didn't get a lot of information about the convention until like 2 or 3 weeks before. That was the one really puzzling thing. I didn't really receive anything except for a confirmation in January that, you know, hey, just, you know, checking back in and making sure you still want to be a guest. And then I guess like 2 weeks before is where I started actually receiving information about the convention, reminding me about vaccination and this, that, and the other thing. But that was the only that was the only time I heard any information about where I pick up badges, et cetera, et cetera.
No, and I mean that makes sense. I mean, under the circumstances, the what you're talking about, Michael, is very puzzling because it was everywhere. I mean, I remember and to speak to you, Dan, like as someone who had a press badge, it was, you know, we got updated on, okay, are you sure you're coming? This is the cutoff date to change your mind. Okay, are you very sure that you're coming? And it was, I mean, it was very purposeful and, you know, the communication was like terrific in that regard in terms of like, okay, here's your cutoff date. Okay, make sure that you confirmed. Like if you say beyond this time, then like you're telling us that you're confirmed. Like it seemed like it was very purposeful and that it was very thorough in terms of that communication. So, yeah, what were you saying, Mike? Go ahead.
I want to put in a plug here for Friends of Comic-Con. I literally put out like 3 articles about the safety protocols, but ahead of time, you know, to make sure that I personally got it out too, you know.
Yeah, as did I. Yeah.
You know, but I want to make sure I got it out, and you know, and our website got it out. And we, you know, honestly, at some point in time, I don't know what you can do with people. You know, you try the best you can, but you know, they have to take part in this. They have to kind of like be a part of it too. So, you know, they have to kind of step up to the plate, but you have to make sure you get the information out to them. That's the first thing. And if you're putting the information out, i.e., it was on Facebook, it was on Twitter, it was on their website. I mean, I don't know how you could buy anything or from there and not see that stuff. And why they would think that they were exempt from it is a mystery to me. But you know, again, it was obvious that in the past they've always had plenty of volunteers. Okay. Yeah. This is an unusual circumstance for everybody.
Yeah.
I think everybody did a very good job under the circumstances because these were unusual. You know, I still think everybody had a very good time. I do.
Yeah.
I had a really good time myself. I met new people, chatted with people. I met one person. You're talking about a good thing that happened. Met one guy in the elevator who was in Atlanta visiting on something else, and he didn't realize that DragonCon was happening, and he said it blew his mind. And he was taking pictures and sending pictures to his friends, and his friends were going like, "Wow!" And he was at the party, I think Thursday night, and he said, "Oh my God!" It was like he was at the best costume party he'd ever been to in his life. So you know, it was fun. It was wonderful. There were hiccups, but you know what? Considering, but let me say this too: the weather. Dan, do you believe that weather? Oh my God! It wasn't even Atlanta.
It was the best weather I've ever
experienced. It was.
I've never
excellent.
seen that. I was expecting humid, and gross, and it was amazing. Yeah.
Atlanta was glad to have us back. Yeah. You could tell the city said, "Thank you, please come back, everyone," and it gave us this beautiful, beautiful weather. So I mean, even standing in line. You know, that line, I mean, when the person almost passed out, we were inside and it was like really tight inside. But outside, oh my God, we were like, oh, this is not so bad. This is beautiful weather. And we're chatting and having a good time. It was like we're having an outside party or something. So, I mean, there were really good things about it. As I said, hiccups too, right? Yeah. But the weather was great. It was marvelous, wonderful.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something else that came up that was like, no, I don't. Everything was ran pretty well. there was definitely the traffic jams that happened periodically, and they closed down roads on Thursday. So for people loading in, that was really rough. There
Okay.
were certain roads that are pretty, like everyone
Open. Yeah.
uses, that
Yeah.
were shut down. So in order to get from one hotel to another, you kind of had to walk around multiple blocks to get there.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, other than
Gotcha.
that, everything ran pretty well. I love the signage. They did a really good job of putting signage up outside to
Mhm.
let people know that some of the buildings that were further on actually held like Artist Alley and things like that, because a lot of the buildings are kind of spread apart from one another. So it's tough to get to one, you know, it's tough to know that part of Dragon Con is actually on the other side of a hill.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, so with all of that in mind, guys, like, can you speak to we have a Dragon Con that's now in the books, obviously, and I know I was talking about the craziness of what is ahead in the coming weeks, in the coming months, of shows that I'm sure you guys are already lined up to attend and to go to. Um, are there certain elements that for each of you, that you're fascinating to see how it might evolve going forward with upcoming shows? I mean, obviously there are going to be some things that are going to be pretty standard across the board, obviously, especially with like repop shows, of what they're going to ask what they're asking of attendees and asking of guests. But maybe there's some other things that based on what you've seen in shows that you've been to thus far, that maybe you're interested to see and how it might evolve going forward.
One of the big things for me that has totally changed the landscape of conventions has been the online aspect. Um,
Yeah.
and that's something that came out of all the COVID experience, as I'm going to call it, where especially for Dragon Con, one of the vendors that I talked to, I did not participate in the online part of Dragon Con this year. Um, it was between conventions butting up against each other. I just didn't have a chance to set everything up. But the online component made almost as much money for one of my vendor friends than the actual convention did. So they ended up, doing really well with the people who just didn't attend but wanted to attend. Um, and they were buying prints, buying, art that they had placed online, things of that nature. So that's
Gotcha.
something that, all of the big conventions have set up an online component that is sort of a virtual con that goes on at the same time. And it's like a marketplace that shuts down at the end of the convention. So it's a limited time thing. Um, but yeah, that was one aspect that I hope continues. So yeah.
Cool, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's the marketplace. I kind of wish it would go maybe a little bit before even, and then a little bit after, because a lot of people don't have, because there are things they want to get to that they didn't get to, or they see something. And if, for you guys, I would think that they could facilitate that maybe honestly 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after. I mean, because
Yeah.
people are running around like crazy. There's just so many things that happen before and after that you don't have the time to get to. So I wish they would expand that out a little bit. And
It's funny you
honestly,
mentioned
I think
that.
for,
I mentioned that to them too.
yeah, well, yeah, they really should do that, because it's in everyone's best interest to do that,
Yeah.
and it helps the show. It definitely helps the artist, and and so that would help the shows get back to the roots too. So maybe San Diego might be hearing this, and they could think about doing that too. I'm just saying, just saying. But no, for those of us attending, yeah, it would be nice so that if we knew an artist we didn't get to, we could go some later time, because there's just too much to do. Oh, that reminds me, Daniel, where were you you're in building 2? What floor?
I was in Comic Pop Artist Alley. I was on the 4th floor. So the
Okay,
entire
okay.
Comic Pop Artist Alley is on the 4th floor of America's Marts building. And then you have the 2 dealer halls underneath. And then building 2 is actually where the quote art show is, which is for the fantasy, illustration, that type of thing.
So you were in what, building 1, or you were in?
I was in the America's Marts building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because see, that's another thing. There was so much happening there. That's why you need to have, like, the 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after. And then 2 weeks before, you could start looking online, and then maybe you could go and talk to that person. You would know, hey, that person I want to go talk to, because there's so many people there. Like you're a top name artist, but there are other artists there who are not top name, but that are there that people could have a chance to go through their work, and they might think, hey, I really want to go, check them out a little bit or something.
It's true. No, there was, there was so much talent in both of those two buildings. The art show and the comic pop artist alley used to be joined next to each other, and they just both expanded to the point that they had to be housed in different buildings. I mean, there was no other way for each one to grow. And they're at the point now where, I think they're eyeing other buildings at this point just for one or the other. Because they always end up turning away a ton of artists. I agree that having something an online component that goes, a week or two before and a week or two after would be fantastic. You always have people that visit your table, take a look at all of the stuff you have, and they pick up your card saying, "Oh, I'm going to make sure
I'll be back."
Yeah, that's like a common thing. But the thing is, as soon as I get home from Dragon Con in particular, I get a ton of emails from people I'm actually looking at a bunch of them right now, asking for original art or prints that I might have had at a show. So that's something where I could just point them to the online component and say, hey, here you go. Everything that I had is still up there on the website. Yeah.
Cool beans. And I realized that this whole show, I'm asking you guys. So the thing that has been interesting is, unfortunately, like, due to crazy circumstances, with travel, wasn't physically able to go, but, thanks to technology, was able to do, a great deal with those that were currently on hand at the show. And, in my experience of attending Dragon Con, like I said, it's such a unique experience, because a little, and I've mentioned this before, but a little backstory on me, if for those of you that aren't aware of my con background, so to speak, is, my first Comic-Con was San Diego Comic-Con. So like, that was my first exposure to cons. So like, I was thrown right into the fire, so to speak, in terms of, cons and how they operate and how they are. And still, even with all that being said, even among, San Diego, among now having, Awesome Con that's here back at home in DC, and attending many others that are, a lot of fun, Dragon Con is still such a unique, as I said, such a unique experience just because of that dynamic of being in hotels versus being in a con or expo. I feel like there's kind of like there's definitely a thinner veil that you have there in terms of being able to have that interaction between guests and attendees that I feel is not really replicated elsewhere. Even though there's an attempt to try to replicate it, it's not, the same. And then, I guess another facet of that too is in going to Dragon Con, another cool part of it is that it's extremely, not to say that other cons aren't social, but even more so, very social cons. So like, you can, it's very much an experience where it's a break from, your everyday life of just being able to, hang out, especially if you go down with a group of friends, which typically, like in my Dragon Con experiences, it's always been with like an army of friends that are staying in each of the venue hotels, which is always cool to, have that happen where, we kind of, it kind of ends up being kind of, I guess you can say a domino effect where we kind of like do a a hop of each of the venues, and then everyone like starts. It's really funny. It's almost like a cylinder type of effect where everyone starts gathering as we hit up every single of the venues, and then eventually we're all together. So so many great memories about Dragon Con, and I was interested to see how it felt, with the unique, as I said, the unique circumstances that were, obviously unavoidable this year. So, with that in mind, guys, are there any like final thoughts that you have before we close off?
I'm looking forward to what next year's Dragon Con is going to be like. This one went much better than I actually was anticipating. I did amazingly well at it. I was so busy that I literally was at the comic park artist alley meeting with people and then went right back to my Airbnb pretty much on a regular basis. I was just too busy. I usually stay at the con hotels, but I didn't this year just because I have a small son, a young son that's 5, and it was one of those. I talked it over with my partner, and she was like, let's not stay at the con hotel this year.
Right. I get you.
Play it safe.
I get you. Mike?
It was honestly, I'm looking forward to next year.
Definitely. Mike?
Well, one good thing about this year is I could actually see the parade because they limited the number of people that could, they, in theory, they didn't have any outside people at the parade. And so it was nice to be able to see the parade for a change.
Okay. All right, cool. And that's one thing that I would say, there's always something that's happening. I've seen small portions of it, and I've been able to attend small portions of it. But that's one thing that I would say, going to another, and attending another Dragon Con, is spending the entire time enjoying that parade. Normally I only am there for maybe like a half an hour or at least like a portion of it, and with so much happening over the course of that whole span, there's so much to do. So I always find that I'm either doing that or I'm doing photography of, cosplay. Shout out to friend Emily, because it's very much like this, where it's like, oh, cool cosplay. Hey, let me take a picture. Okay, you cool? All right. Thanks. Bye. And then it's very much like that, where like you're off to one destination, but in the travel component of getting from point A to point B, there's a lot of crazy fun stuff, unexpected stuff that happens in between all of that. So with all that said, guys, I want to thank you so much for hopping on and talking about reflecting on this year's Dragon Con. Before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you? Dan, go ahead.
DanielGovar.com, or on Instagram, Daniel Govar. Pretty much you type my name in and I'm on pretty much all social media, so you can find me that way.
Cool. Michael?
Mickle P at on Twitter, and then Mickle P at Friends of Comic-Con. That's my pseudonym.
Okay. All right. Well, there you guys have it. Again, I want to thank Dan and Michael for coming on and sharing their thoughts and reflecting, as I said, on this year's Dragon Con 2021. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me there on Twitter at Brandon Choi ENT. And of course, you can find me on Instagram at Brandon Choi _ENT. Thanks so much for watching. Be safe out there, guys. And I will see you soon. Bye.
See ya.